Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Rick Barrett. Rick Barrett is a Tai Chi master and author. He is the author of Finding You in a World of It and Tai Chi Through the Western Gate. You can find out more about Rick Barrett and his wonderful work at rickbarrett.net. Welcome, Rick Barrett.
So great to be with you again, Catherine.
Now, we're going to be talking about today about meditation and stillness and meditation in action. And, people like you and me, we tell everybody, oh, you need to meditate. And most people think, well, for me to meditate, that means I need to sit on a cushion, shut my eyes, and quiet my mind. And for a lot of us, that's a very difficult proposition. So Rick Barrett, meditation is one of those everybody knows words, but I think it means different things to different people. How do you explain meditation?
That's absolutely right, because people are exposed to a certain type of meditation and they think, oh, that's it. And there are, someone said, oh, there are as many types of meditations there are kinds of sports. There are lots and lots of ways to do it. And the primary underlying thing, I think, in all forms of meditation is any type of activity that allows you to shift from conceptual to non-conceptual awareness. That is, to be able to move to get out of your head and to be able to be in the present moment. And so whenever you when you're in your head, you can think of it as being trapped in a loop of excessive thinking. One thought follows another, and they're coming. And sometimes, I saw one study, I think, that said that 90% of people, I think it was the Cleveland Clinic, said that 90% of people's thoughts are repetitive, and the vast majority are negative. And that's because the nervous system that enabled our ancestors to survive, it has a negativity bias. That is, the person who was able to be hypervigilant and anxious and always looking around was the one that spotted the tiger first, and she got to pass on her genes. And her sister, who was joyful and happy and very accepting of whatever's going on, she didn't. And so consequently, humans develop this negativity bias, which means that, don't trust anything, because there's danger out there. And that tends to no longer serve us nearly as well as it did back on the grasslands of Africa. It serves, now we actually want to shift that entirely around. So we're able to move into more of a positive frame of mind, which has numerous health benefits, as I'm sure you've talked about many times. So what we're doing is shifting from that thinking mind into the gap between thoughts. So if you think of every thought has a beginning, a middle, and end. And it goes somewhere, it comes from somewhere we don't know, and it goes somewhere we don't know. So there's a space between thoughts. And most of us are only noticing the thoughts that are there. They're the ones that grab our attention. And we rarely notice that space between thoughts, the gap between thoughts. And that's where the non-conceptual awareness arises. And that's where we're able to tap into a whole brain coherence.
That's a great explanation. Now, for our audience, if you're listening to Rick Barrett and go, gosh, I notice my mind and my not mind never shuts up. And, one of the things that I talk to, because I have a lot of clients who are women, there's a lot of research about the difference between the male brain and the female brain. And the story goes like a man and a woman, say a husband and wife, they can be driving in a car together, and a woman will say to her husband, "What are you thinking?" And the woman says, "What do you mean?" And the guy will go, "Nothing." And the woman will go, "What do you mean, nothing?" Because women's brains never shut down, right? You know, so if you notice you're someone who has lots of repetitive thoughts and you have trouble quieting your mind, there is a Bach flower remedy called white chestnut. Now, Bach flower remedies are inexpensive. They work on the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects. And you take 2 to 4 drops under your tongue 5 times a day. And if you're someone who's especially caught in these negative thought loops, again, you can take white chestnut and it'll help you to clear those energetic patterns. Now, Rick Barrett, right now we're all living through the coronavirus pandemic, and I've been watching the government statistics, and on a national basis here in the United States, early in the pandemic, the level of clinical levels of anxiety and depression were around 30%. I just looked at it again yesterday, and it's trending upwards to like 34, 35%. So about 1/3 of us are experiencing clinical levels of anxiety, depression. And even if we ourselves are not anxious or depressed, we're having to live with everybody else who is anxious and depressed right now. And and on top of that, there was a new study that just came out yesterday that said 25% of young adults, and these are 18 to 34, had contemplated suicide in the past month. So, here we are, we're talking about meditation, we're talking about how our brains are hardwired to focus on the negative. Why do you think it's so important at this time? I mean, it's always important to learn how to meditate. It's always important to learn how to interrupt those negative thoughts. But, here, while we're experiencing high levels of anxiety and depression and even suicidal ideation, why do you think it's a life critical skill at this time to learn how to interrupt that negativity?
Great question. I tend to go to the woo-woo stuff really quickly, but I also like to ground it in hard science as well. Just so, and the two are not mutually exclusive. So I'm gonna go at it from a physiological medical perspective first, to be able to actually to ground us in something which is actually controllable and experiential. And the stress hormones that get produced by the body whenever we're confronted with an emergency state, something says you're in danger, Rick Barrett. There is a short-term stress hormone, which is adrenaline or epinephrine, and that comes in, that's gasoline on the fire. It's like you get a big blaze and things get handled, and it passes through the system rather quickly. It actually in a few minutes, like 5 minutes, and it's gone. So it doesn't linger. Whereas there's another stress hormone called cortisol, which is a longer acting one, and it takes approximately 20 minutes to go. But every time you have that new thought that says, "Oh my God, I'm screwed," you kick up another round of cortisol, which means it just keeps going around and around again. So if you have a thinking pattern that is constantly reaffirming the negative, then you're constantly throwing another log on the cortisol fire, and it continues. And some studies showed that even a few minutes of exposure to cortisol can suppress your immune system for up to 3 days.
Mm.
That's dangerous. So if you are in a state of constant fear, anxiety, you are constantly suppressing your immune system. This is one of the functions that cortisol does. It actually suppresses the immune system as a way of dealing with emergencies. It says, okay, we don't need that right now. We need this other thing. We need to just act quickly and run from that tiger. And so that's the way we're built. So the meditation is one of the things it does quite elegantly is if you do it for 20 minutes, you shut that down for just long enough to be able to interrupt the cortisol cycle, which means that you're not constantly feeding the fire, which then starts to reduce, and then you start to reacclimate yourself to what it means to be you, and no longer stuck in that fear-dominated thinky state.
Right. And why do you think that right now it's absolutely critical that we learn how to interrupt that negative feedback thought loop?
Well, the evidence that I've run into regarding the COVID-19 is that if you have a high degree of a high level of immune system, then a lot of times it's just not going to touch you. It's not you're not going to be even a willing participant in that exercise, and that's why so many people who are being adversely affected are really elderly people whose immune systems no longer have the pizzazz that they once did, and so consequently these things have an entry point. So if you have this positive energy and you a strong immune system, then you tend to ward this off. In Chinese medicine, and in Tai Chi, there's something called Wei Qi, and Wei Qi is external Qi. Qi is your energy field, and the most people that I run into have collapsed energy systems. That is, they don't even know that they have Qi, and they don't, even if they understand it intellectually, they don't feel it. So to get Wei Qi or external Qi, you have to have enough energy. It's sort of like filling up a balloon. So if your body is a balloon and you're kind of collapsed and your energy field is collapsed, you'll feel that. You'll see that, you'll see a person's posture and their body language be that of something where the world is pushing in on them. So what you want to do is you want to have enough energy so that you're pushing out on the world with more energy than it's pushing on you. And then you develop this Wei Qi, which has this power to ward off what they say pernicious influences in the Chinese medicine.
Right. And you and I absolutely agree, because when I do a medical intuitive reading, Rick Barrett, literally the first thing that I read is a person's life energy, right? Mm-hmm. So I put it on a scale of 50 out of 100, with 50 being average for a man or woman your age. And I explain to people, well, the higher your life energy, the more capable you are of warding off, whether it's a psychological stress or, a virus, right? And it's so important at this time to really have practices where we rebuild our personal energy and build up our Qi as high as possible, so that we can live through this time and really sail through it. And hence, practicing Tai Chi. I know right now I'm teaching yoga 6 times a week and Qigong once a week. And it's, thank God, right? How many times a week do you practice Tai Chi?
I do something every day, whether it's Tai Chi or Bagua, Xingyi, Qigong, I do something every day. And I teach pretty often also. So But more importantly, I take the principles and I'm doing it all day, every day. So it's not just whatever I'm doing it. It's not just when I'm actually practicing the art that I'm feeling the effects. I'm feeling the effects all the while, and that's because I'm doing with the other part of this meditation and action. That's where that comes in, because when you're doing meditation and action, you are then incorporating this energy, and you're feeling it whenever you're washing the dishes or driving the car or walking down the street.
So what makes something meditation in action?
Well, there is a Japanese Zen patriarch, Hakuin, who he's the guy that came up with the "what is the sound of one hand?" So he could turn a phrase, and he said that meditation amidst activity is 1,000 million times superior to meditation in stillness. So that's a lot. By my figures, that's 1 billion. And so what he's saying, no, it's a whole bunch more important to be able to have this state of meditation while you're in activity than it is to just be able to sit there. And he's not, because he's a big fan of sitting there too. So he's saying, this is great, but you know what's really great? It's being able to do this in your life. So what meditation in action does is it enables you to toggle between conceptual and non-conceptual awareness. And meditation in action is the opposite of what a lot of people would consider that to be, which is, oh, I just kind of get into a groove and I turn my mind off and I just kind of float along. It's like, no, it's the opposite of that. It's where you are actually consciously aware and creating everything, every movement. And when you do that, you have to shift into a state of awareness, which could be described as body, mind, spirit integration. Another name for it that I like is super consciousness. That is where you move beyond the thinking mind and you're able to intuit, to know without thinking. And that's because your brain is moved into a heightened state of coherence, where you're able to access parts of the brain that you're not running it through the narrow channel of your thinking mind, through the conceptual awareness. You still need that conceptual awareness to be able to tell a story, to be able to talk just like I'm doing now. You need that, be able to have that conceptual awareness, be able to choose words and to be able to analyze things and to be able to respond to changes in your environment. But there's this other thing where if you can immediately toggle, several times a second even, to the non-conceptual awareness, then you're able to function at a very high level. You get into a state of what some people call the zone, or being in flow. That's where you're suddenly like you're totally in the present moment, and you're able to deal with challenges that come up, and you're figuring out answers to questions that your brain, your ordinary rational mind would have a lot of trouble dealing with.
Right. Now let's talk in practical terms for our audience about how they could actually do this. So I'll give myself an example. When I'm teaching yoga, I'm teaching on several levels. One is I'm teaching the postures. It's like, okay, you put your foot here and your hand here and you breathe this way. And but I purposely design my classes in a specific flow so that we have effort where you're, really making an effort to do something. And then there's a release. And in that release, in that quiet space, your mind just goes, thank God. And then in that release and that quiet space, your mind just immediately slides into a quieter space where you're more in a feeling state and more aware of the energy around you. So, how can we, whether it's in practice of yoga or Tai Chi or in everyday life, move our mind into this quieter space where we are more aware in a relaxed manner, achieving
Great.
this super consciousness?
Yeah, that's great question and great example. I think that you're describing exactly what I'm talking about there. That quiet space, that super consciousness where you are feeling, and here I use feeling in the sense of sensory input rather than emotion. So a lot of people, well, there's some confusion around that word. So when we're talking about feeling, we're talking about consciously sensing, intentionally sensing. So your body mind is being bombarded by impulses, millions of impulses per second, be it and as being channeled through your five senses. So to be able to sort through that, your rational mind can only sort through a couple of dozen bits of information per second. And so there's a very narrow channel that it goes through. But if you shift into that state that you're describing, then you make this shift that William Blake said that when the doors of perception are cleansed, we see everything as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up and sees only through the chinks in his cavern. You know, and that chinks in the cavern, that's your conscious mind. It sees, this tiny little through this tiny little keyhole looking at the world. Whereas whenever you cleanse the doors of perception, what you're talking about there, that feeling state, then you open up to the infinite that is present in every moment. And so to do it as a practical, I like to start, and you can do it through any of the five senses, but the one that is universal is the sense of touch. That is, you see with your eyes, you hear with your ears, so they're localized into these things, and they also have a link higher in the chain in terms of analytical thought. They're much closer to that thinking mind than say is feeling, which you're getting impulses from your whole body all day, every day. Even if you're not conscious of what your shirt feels like, or conscious of the touch of your foot on the floor, it's still, that information is still part of your awareness. And so if right now you just feel the touch of your foot on the floor consciously and reach down through your foot and feel that, you are activating parts of your brain which have been asleep, maybe forever, and you are awakening this, and you're creating new neural connections in your brain, and you're activating parts of the brain which tend to get shouted down by this conceptual mind, which says, no, I got this covered, I know it all, I got labels for everything. And so being able to feel is really, really key to all this.
Right. And one of the things that we know in natural healing is that you can either think or you can feel. Your brain can't do both. So the more that we focus on this feeling, and as Rick Barrett says, literally going into the kinesthetic awareness, rather than the interpretive story, this is what this means, again, life sucks, then you die, type story.
Uh-huh.
If you're in that story, you're not in kinesthetic. So does this describe what you mean by mindfulness?
No, actually, mindfulness is the practice of moment by moment awareness of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and the surroundings, but it's observational. It's you're mindful of something, and it's a psychological process. Here's a definition: a psychological process of purposely bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment without judgment. So it tends to say, oh, this is a computer screen that I'm looking at and conversing through, and so there's it what it does is it establishes context, and it just by being able to control your mind so that you can direct it and say, I am aware of this thing right now. Let's say my breath. If I'm just being there observing my breath, that is mindfulness. You're saying, and while I'm doing that, I'm not doing a million other things. I'm not having a million other thoughts, and I'm starting to control my mind. I'm starting to use my mind to change my brain. I'm creating new neural connections, and I'm starting to channel things in a certain direction. So whenever we're doing the feeling thing, we go beyond mindfulness. We use the mindfulness to get there. We use the mindfulness to say, okay, I'm going to be aware of these feelings. And then we go beyond that to something which is able to transcend and include the mindfulness. It's able to take us into something where we start to access the intuition, which comes from this whole brain coherence. You don't know where that information is coming from, but it's coming from somewhere. And if I do the math on it, I can show you my homework and I can show you how I get there, but that would take much too much time. Just take my word for it. This is what it is right now for me.
Right. Now let's say someone's listening to this broadcast and they go, okay, well, right now I'm feeling, and what I'm feeling is anxiety, what I'm feeling is depression. Even as I mentioned, some people right now are even feeling like they want to kill themselves. So, and those are legitimate feelings. And if you're feeling that way right now, my heart goes out to you, which is part of why we're having this conversation. So when you're feeling in that really down, anxious, depressed, suicidal state, how can we use the practice of mindfulness to shift into something better?
Well, let's go beyond mindfulness and use the practice of feeling to do that. And so here again, with terms of feeling, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, that's the other definition of feeling, which has more to do with emotions, and different than the feeling, which is to actually consciously experience the tactile of your body. And what that does is it brings you into your body, mind, and it also brings you into the present moment, because anxiety is fear of an imagined future. You're saying something terrible is going to happen. I don't know what yet, but something terrible is going to happen. And so I'm going to be in this heightened state of alertness. And if you want to shift out of that, well, just do a quick one right now. So if you were to just relax and point with your index fingers and just feel the index fingers. Feel what that feels like, and then relax them, and then point again. Take a breath, and the mind instantly clears. Why? Because you are, by using your sense of feeling, your touch, you're able to then shift out of that obsessive thought loop and move into the present moment, the radical present. Now, if we add to that, let's say you point your index fingers. Now, just reach out a little bit with your elbows. Don't have to lift, just lift, just reach out a little bit. And when you do that, you open up the shoulder joints, and immediately there is a shift in your energy. So what you've done is you've unkinked the hose. The fear, anxiety, etc., tends to cause us to tighten in the shoulders. Most people I know have some degree of shoulder tension, and it goes back decades. It's not related to what's happening now. Now it just happens to be a trigger for it, but it's just the way that they respond to anxiety. There's a tension in the shoulders. But whenever you reach out with the elbows, you point with the index fingers, you unkink the hose and allow the energy to flow. And if you feel into your hands, you notice that there's tingling, pulsing, a sense of fullness, maybe some heat immediately gets generated. The longer you do it, the more it does. So by doing that, you're allowing the energy to flow, and this enables the brain recognizes this and says, "Oh, I'm safer now. I'm safer now than I was 5 seconds ago." And whoa, let's try that again. I point, I reach with my elbows, ding, and there I am again. And so it becomes, the more often you do it, it becomes a predictable technique for making that happen. It doesn't work if you just think about it. If you just think about moving your fingers, if you think about your elbows, then you're creating a separation. You're using your rational mind to objectify, to create a concept of your fingers, concept of your elbows, and we're back into the thinky part, which goes and starts that whole cycle over again.
Now, Rick Barrett, Tai Chi master, could you explain what you mean by body, mind, spirit integration?
Well, it's kind of what we've been talking about here. That is that we have the body part is the brain, the nervous system, all the supporting tissues, everything. And if we don't have an awareness of that, then we are stuck in our thoughts. And to have that, to be able to create that, Saint Bonaventure has said that there are 3 eyes: the eye of flesh, the eye of mind, and the eye of spirit. And the eye of flesh is that pre-conscious awareness. That is before your conscious mind says, "Oh, that's the little toe of my right foot." You know, if you until you think about that, until you bring mindfulness to the little toe of your right foot, you're probably not feeling it. There's some sensation coming from there just by the fact that you're alive, but it's really low on the scale of priorities. So whenever you do that, you say, okay, just right now, feel your left elbow and reach with that. And like, there's a shift. That's because you have awakened parts of the brain, your somatosensory cortex, and I forget some of the other parts, but the parts of the brain that integrate the feeling sense with the thinking. And so suddenly you're creating this integration that is happening at a vertical level. That is, thoughts are bubbling up, or neurons are firing, and you're getting impulses throughout the body, and they rise to the level of the brain where it recognizes, the conscious mind can actually recognize that you got enough information that says, oh, pay attention to me. If I sit down on attack, that is that enough information is coming from that place, and it says, get up now. And so then I immediately elevate. So that's that things arise, is called microgenesis, that the idea that these impulses are arising every moment, and your conscious mind is selecting which piece. So if we can get into body, mind, spirit integration, we open the three eyes, we are able to use feeling, the sense, that feeling sense, or any of the other senses, to be able to bypass the need to conceptualize or to make life into a story for the moment. We're still going to go back to that. We're still going to go back to the story because we're humans and we do that really, really well. We make stories up, we tell them to each other, and we try to explain life. But we want to be able to shift out of that so that our life is not just about our story. It's not just regret for the past and fear of the future. It is about now, where you actually are able to shift out of the story for a moment and be able to be in the present, be able to be in now.
Now, Rick Barrett, what is spirit in body, mind, spirit integration?
Yeah, spirit's one of those everybody knows words, or at least everybody thinks they know words, and there's lots of ways to talk about spirit. In the sense that I'm using it here, I'm using it like there's a term in Tai Chi called Shen, S-H-E-N, and Shen is they translate it as spirit, and it's whenever you move into a state of wholeness and radical presence, where you're here, you're present, you're now, and you're alive. You're feeling the vitality. So it comes from that state of wholeness. Whenever your energy field is collapsed, it's harder to feel really present. And that's where we get into depression. That's where anxiety, it's like the world is pushing in on me much more than I can push back. And so spirit is where you are full of life. You are full of that spirit of vitality, and you're able to do things. And that's where in that integration, we don't get there by transcending. We get there by immersing, by engaging life, and we actually by feeling into our bodies, by feeling into the world around us, by exchanging information and energy with the world around us. And whenever in that state of spirit, then you're able to access information and energy that is not available to you in your normal state. And that's where the fun begins.
Right. The otherwise known as intuition, right? Which is
intuition is another way of putting it. Yeah. Well, intuition is a way of knowing in that state.
Yeah. One of my synonyms for meditation is soul guidance, right? When you're in that state, then you can listen to your soul. Now, Rick Barrett, how does meditation in action affect our autonomic nervous system?
Well, the autonomic nervous system is the more or less automatic functions of the nervous system, like regulating your heartbeat or your breathing or your digestive functions, things like that. Those are guided by your autonomic nervous system because you don't want to have to think about them all the time. If you had to think about them all the time, and you forget to beat your heart, you're going to be in a bad way. So it's something that's happening at a very primitive part of your nervous system, which is also controlled by your medulla oblongata, which is a part of your brain stem, and it keeps the clock ticking. So it's divided into two parts, and you can really crudely express it as like the part that speeds things up or the part that slows things down. And the speed up part is your sympathetic nervous system, and that's really tied in a lot to that fear response, that hypervigilance that we have, the fight or flight kind of response. And it jacks things up, the heart races, the breathing gets shallow and fast, and we shut down our digestion because we don't need that right now. We're just dealing with the saber-toothed tiger that is coming after us. And the parasympathetic is the slow down, and it's involved with rest and digestion and healing. And so you want, neither is good or bad. You want both, and to be able to regulate them so that they have this dynamic balance is the key to happy living, because you want to be able to get out there and do stuff and speed things up and be able to function in the world. And you also want to be able to quiet it down and bring the energy in and restore and heal.
Right. And, you know, so often in my medical intuitive readings, I find that the core issue for people is they're stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. You may want to relax, but you can't, right? It's like, I know I need to relax, but I can't. And so having practices like meditation, like Tai Chi, like Qigong, like yoga, it gives you a modality that allows you to begin to balance our autonomic nervous system. Now, Rick
Absolutely.
Barrett, and right now, I think this is a life-saving skill for most of us, you know, to be able to get out of that stress, right?
Right.
And
Right.
find,
I think so much of activity, and this is where meditation and action comes in. So much of activity, people think they have to gear up into the sympathetic nervous system in order to make that work, and they have to fire themselves up. And I notice it particularly whenever I'm teaching in Tai Chi, we're teaching push hands, where people's responses to a challenge is to tighten up and to resist. And it's because the inability to make that shift, to say, oh, how can I relax calmly and be able to function and to move effortlessly and to be able to create the effects that I need to create. I don't need to tense up. I don't need to get myself all cranked up in order to be able to make something happen. And so the moving meditation, or meditation in action, you learn to do while in this balanced state.
yes, absolutely. That's what I'm always saying to my yoga students. Learn how to do something effortful in a relaxed manner. And when you can do that, you can get out of the anxiety, get out of the depression, get out of feeling like you have to kill yourself. Now,
Perfect. Yes.
exactly. Life-saving skill. So Rick Barrett, what is the default mode network in the brain?
Well, this is something that neuroscientists have been postulating now for a while. And anything having to do with neuroscience, we have to recognize that it is in its infancy. That anything talking about a medical or physical or scientific approach to consciousness, approach to how we are functioning, is just a few decades old. We're really just stumbling around in the dark. But along the way, we can pick up certain ideas which I think are useful for our practices, for our meditation. So one of these is the default mode network. And it says that there are various locations in the brain where things appear to be working as a system to perform the necessary function of keeping the organism, or you, alive by being aware of what's going on, the dangers that might be facing, and to be able to update your narrative moment by moment, your story. So you're one of the things that it does, it keeps you churning over past events and worrying about future events as a way of keeping you alive. And it's what happens whenever you're not consciously doing something else, when you're not thinking about something, when you're not consciously involved with an activity where you are intentionally directing your mind. It's what comes back in and just go, it chirps away. And as long as you're awake, and it may even be chirping away while you're asleep, they're still looking at that. So it is meditation of all sorts is enabling us to be able to control our minds. This is where the body, mind, spirit integration is. Be able to control our minds so that we can intentionally shut that down for the moment so that we can direct it somewhere else. And we can do that either as a conceptual thought, where we start to say, oh, I'm going to think about some math problems now, or going to go through my laundry list, or what, my shopping list, or whatever. And then or you can do it non-conceptually, where you are just shifting into the present moment, the radical present. And then you get a chance to open up to intuition, open up to a heightened awareness that allows you to make sense of things. I'll get a little woo-woo here, but saying that we're moving outside of the confines of the 3 dimensions, the 4 dimensions that our language matter, the 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. Those 4 dimensions are defined by our language, and they keep us in this little box. And then once we move into that non-conceptual space, we move beyond the limits of those 4 dimensions and into an extra dimensional awareness, which is not easily translated into language, but it is certainly something that is part of yours and my experience.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today has been the wonderful Rick Barrett, author of Finding You in a World of It and Tai Chi Through the Western Gate. You can find out more about Rick Barrett and his wonderful work at rickbarrett.net. And right now you can practice Tai Chi with Rick Barrett online from wherever you are in the world. So remember, when you learn how to shift into this state of mind, body, spirit integration, you're going to shift out of depression, anxiety, suicidal feelings, and heal yourself naturally. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.